Good morning, everybody. For today's video, I want to be reading Daniel chapter 3 today because it talks a lot about how Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego had faith and how they trusted in God through one of their battles that they went through. And I just want to talk about that today. So I'll go ahead and start reading, and afterwards we can talk about it. Okay, chapter 3, verse 1. King Nebuchadnezzar made an image of gold 60 cubits high and 6 cubits wide, and set it up on the plain of Dura in the province of Babylon. He then summoned the satraps, prefects, governors, advisors, treasurers, judges, magistrates, I don't know how to say that, and all the other provincial officials to come to the dedication of the image he has set up. So the satraps, prefects, governors, advisors, treasurers, judges, magistrates, and all the other provincial officials assembled for the dedication of the image that King Nebuchadnezzar has set up, and they stood before it. And then the herald loudly proclaimed, "Nations and people of every language, that is what you are commanded to do. As soon as you hear the sound of the horn, flute, zither, lyre, harp, pipe, and all kinds of music, you must fall down and worship the image of gold that King Nebuchadnezzar has set up. Whoever does not fall down and worship will immediately be thrown into a blazing furnace." Therefore, as soon as they heard the sound of the horn, flute, zither, lyre, harp, and all kinds of music, all the nations and peoples of every language fell down and worshipped the image of gold that King Nebuchadnezzar has set up. At this time, some astrologers came forward and denounced the Jews. They said to the king Nebuchadnezzar, "May the king live forever. Your Majesty has issued a decree that everyone who hears the sound of the horn, flute, zither, lyre, harp, pipe, and all kinds of music must fall down and worship the image of gold, and that whoever does not fall down and worship will be thrown into a blazing furnace. But there are some Jews whom you have set over the affairs of the province of Babylon, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, who pay no attention to you, your Majesty. Then they neither serve your gods nor worship the image of gold you have set up." So King Nebuchadnezzar basically said, "You are gonna bow down and worship this piece of gold that I have set up, or you are gonna be thrown into a blazing furnace of fire, and basically you're gonna die by burning." And so Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego said, "We're not gonna worship your piece of gold. We worship God, our God," basically. And so verse 13 says, "Furious with rage, Nebuchadnezzar summoned Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. So these men were brought before the king, and Nebuchadnezzar said to them, 'Is it true, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, that you do not serve my gods or worship the image of gold I have set up? Now when you hear the sound of the horn, flute, zither, lyre, harp, pipe, and all kinds of music, if you are ready to fall down and worship the image I made, very good. But if you do not worship it, you will be thrown immediately into a blazing furnace. Then what God will be able to rescue you from my hand?'" Okay, so Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego replied to him, "King Nebuchadnezzar, we do not need to defend ourselves before you in this matter. If we are thrown into the blazing furnace, the God we serve is able to deliver us from it, and he will deliver us from your Majesty's hand. But even if he does not, we want you to know, Your Majesty, that we will not serve your gods or worship the image of gold you have set up." So they're keeping their faith in God, and they're like, okay, go ahead and throw us into the furnace of fire. We don't care. We know that our God is going to save us. So they are willing to put their pride aside and trust in God wholeheartedly. And that's exactly what they did. They were like, we don't care if you burn us alive. We put our faith in God. And I encourage you, if you're going through something like a battle that you're facing, whatever battle it is, I hope and pray that you put your whole heart and faith in God and put it in His hands and let Him handle it. Verse 19 goes on to say, "Then Nebuchadnezzar was furious with Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, and his attitude toward them changed. He ordered the furnace heated 7 times hotter than usual and commanded some of the strongest soldiers, in his army to tie up Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego and throw them into the blazing furnace. So these men, wearing their robes, trousers, turbans, and other clothes, were bound and thrown into the blazing furnace. The king's command was so urgent and the furnace so hot that the flames of the fire killed the soldiers who took up Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, and these 3 men, firmly tied, fell into the blazing furnace." So the strongest soldiers took Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego were walking up to the burning furnace of fire, and the soldiers died from how hot it was. But Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, nothing happened to them. They didn't have even a speck of fire on them. Nothing. They didn't get hurt at all walking up towards it. And that's amazing. Verse 24 says, Then King Nebuchadnezzar leaped to his feet in amazement and asked his advisors, "Weren't there 3 men that we tied up and threw into the fire?" They replied, "Certainly, Your Majesty." He said, "Look, I see 4 men walking around in the fire, unbound and unharmed, and the 4th looks like a son of the gods." So while Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego were in the furnace, there was another. It was either Jesus or it was an angel that God sent down to help be with him. And they were protected because they had so much faith in God, and they decided to worship God and not this piece of gold. So God was like, "Okay, I will protect you because you have so much faith in me." 26 says, Nebuchadnezzar then approaches the opening of the blazing furnace and shouted, "Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, servants of the Most High God, come out and come here." So Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego came out of the fire, and the satraps, prefects, governors, and royal advisors crowded around them. They saw that the fire had not harmed their bodies, nor was a hair of their heads singed. Their robes were not scorched, and there was no smell of fire on them. So they didn't even smell like the fire, and they probably were in there for a good bit. Then Nebuchadnezzar said, "Praise be to the God of Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, who has sent his angel and rescued his servants. They trusted in him and defied the king's command, and were willing to give up their lives rather than serve or worship any god except their own God. Therefore, I decree that the people of any nation or language who say anything against the God of Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego be cut into pieces, and their houses be turned into piles of rubble. For no other God can save in this way. Then the king promoted Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego in the province of Babylon. So as soon as King Nebuchadnezzar saw that they were perfectly unharmed, didn't even smell like fire, he was like, "Wow, I actually believe that in your God now." And I do want to talk about having other idols ahead of God. Give me 1 second. I'm going to be turning to Exodus 20, verse 3. And I want to read that to you guys. Okay. Okay, verse 3, Exodus 20. You shall have no other gods before me. And that's Deuteronomy 5, verse 7 also says that. But I also encourage you guys to read 2 Kings 17, verse 38, and Judges 10, verse 13. And it talks about, all these verses talk about one thing, all have one thing in common. They all talk about how you should have no other gods before me. That means you should not be putting another object before God. You shouldn't be putting your friends before God, your family before God, your phone and video games and smoking and vaping and partying with friends. You shouldn't put anything else before God. The first thing you do when you wake up in the morning is you should put God first, always, whether that be praying or diving into your word first. And I'm not gonna lie, I am a human. I struggle a lot with doing that in the mornings. The first thing I do in the mornings when I wake up is get on my phone, but that is something that I am trying really hard to work on. So I encourage you guys to find out what you're putting ahead of God and find the strength within yourself to put that aside. And also, I want you to also try to be like Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego and have no other gods before God and worship God wholeheartedly. Don't turn away from him when things get hard. I'll turn towards him. That's what he wants. He wants to be able to save you. So I encourage you to turn towards God if you are going through something, a battle that you're facing, whatever, big or small, whatever it is. I encourage you to turn towards him. I hope you guys have a wonderful rest of your day, and I will talk to you guys in my next video.